Chapter 1. The drawing. There is a specific kind of silence that has nothing to do with sound. It's the silence that falls over you when you're standing in your own kitchen, coffee in your hand, morning light coming through the window at that soft Saturday angle. The kind of light that makes everything look gentle and safe, and you realize with absolute clarity that your entire life has been a performance you weren't told you were in. I was wearing my gray robe, the one with the frayed left cuff that I kept meaning to replace. Emma's cereal bowl was in the sink. The coffee was fresh. Daniel had made it before his shower, which I remember thinking was unusually considerate of him. The radio was on low. Some weekend morning show, the kind with soft voices and no urgency. And I was standing in front of the refrigerator. Emma's teacher had sent home a stack of artwork on Friday afternoon. 12 drawings, maybe more, all rubber banded together with the little note on top. Our family unit project. So proud of this class. I had stuck them all up Friday evening without really looking. The way you do when dinner needs finishing and a 6-year-old needs bathing, and the day has already taken everything you had. But Saturday morning, coffee in hand, I looked. I looked at the finger paintings and the alphabet practice sheets and the lopsided house drawings, and then I saw it. Our family. Mommy. Daddy. Emma. Crayon figures in a row the way children draw them. Round heads, stick arms, triangle dresses. Sweet. Familiar. And then a fourth figure. Taller than me. Brown crayon hair. A red dress. Standing close to Daddy. Closer than I stood. Their crayon hands touching at the fingertips. And at the bottom, in my daughter's careful, wobbly 6-year-old handwriting. Daddy's friend Trisha. She'd spelled friend wrong. Friendy. My daughter spelled the word wrong and still managed to tell me more truth than my husband had in 2 years. I didn't drop the coffee. I want you to know that. I stood very still, the mug warm in both hands, and I read that word 4 times. Friend. 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 Upstairs I could hear the shower running. I set the coffee down on the counter. I took the drawing off the refrigerator. I photographed it with my phone's sharp focus good light timestamp on. And then I opened my messages, found Daniel's name, and typed 7 words. Emma has something to show you. I attached the photo. I hit send. 30 seconds later, I heard the shower turn off. Then silence. Then footsteps, slow, careful footsteps, coming down the stairs like a man walking toward something he already knew he couldn't outrun. He appeared in the kitchen doorway. Wet hair. Towel around his waist. Pale in a way I had never seen on him before. And I had known this man for 10 years. Babe, I can explain. You have until Emma finishes her toast, I said. I did not look up from my coffee. Emma was at the kitchen table behind me, feet swinging, completely absorbed in her breakfast, humming something from a cartoon I didn't recognize. She ate very slowly that morning. She always did love breakfast. What happened in that kitchen didn't end a marriage. The marriage had already been ending. I just hadn't been given the courtesy of knowing. What happened that Saturday morning was something else entirely. It was the moment I stopped being the woman things happened to, and started being the woman who decided what happened next. But to understand what I did, and why it worked, you need to understand who I was before that drawing. And who Daniel had spent 2 years trying to make me forget I was. Chapter 2. The wife they built me to be. My name is Claire Whitfield. I am 34 years old. And for 6 years before I became a full-time mother, I was a paralegal at Hendricks and Morrow Family Law in Nashville, Tennessee. I want you to hold that detail. It matters more than anything else in this story. I was good at my job. Not in the way people say to be polite, I mean genuinely, specifically good. I understood asset structures. I knew how joint property worked in Tennessee. I had spent 6 years reading financial disclosures, depositions, settlement agreements, and discovery documents for some of the most contentious divorces in Davidson County. I had watched men hide money in LLC structures. I had watched women misleverage they didn't know they had. I had sat beside attorneys in mediation rooms and taken notes so precise that 2 of the partners told me I should have gone to law school. I was $32 an hour, a paralegal badge, and someone else's name on the door. But I knew things. Then I met Daniel Whitfield at a colleague's backyard birthday party in the summer of 2016. He was 31, tall, well-dressed in the effortless way that takes actual effort, and he laughed at things I said in a way that made me feel sharply, specifically seen. He worked in commercial real estate development. He had plans. He had confidence. And 6 months in, when things got serious, he told me he loved me in a way that made me believe him completely. We married in October 2018. Emma came in March 2019. And it was Daniel who suggested, when Emma was 4 months old, that I leave Hendricks and Morrow. "You don't need to go back," he said one night, Emma asleep on his chest, both of us exhausted and quiet in the way new parents are. "I make enough. She needs you here. You can always go back later." He said it like a gift. I accepted it like one. What I didn't understand then, what I understand now with painful clarity, is that "you can always go back later" is one of the most effective ways to make sure someone never does. Because later becomes months. Months become a year becomes 2. Your professional contacts go quiet. Your confidence erodes in the specific way it does when your daily accomplishments are measured in nap schedules and grocery runs and keeping another human being alive. You forget slowly and then all at once that you were once the person in the room who caught what everyone else missed. Daniel didn't forget. He just preferred the version of me that had. By the time Emma started school, I was 34 years old, 19 months out of the workforce, financially dependent on a man who had started coming home late on Tuesdays and Thursdays, whose phone now faced down on every surface he set it on, and who had told me at his company's Christmas party, in front of his colleagues and their spouses, that I used to work in law. Used to. Past tense. Like something finished. Like something small. I smiled. I held my wine glass. I said nothing. But I remember the exact way those words landed. And I remember thinking for just a moment that the woman I used to be would have had something very precise to say back. I was about to remember how to be her again. But before I tell you what I found and what I did with it, I need to tell you what the previous 2 years had actually looked like. Because the drawing on the refrigerator wasn't a beginning. It was an ending. And endings, the real ones, are never actually surprises. They're just the moment you finally let yourself see what you already knew. Chapter 3. The pattern. Here is what I have learned about deception inside a marriage. It almost never announces itself. It doesn't arrive as something shocking. It arrives as something slightly off. A texture change. A frequency shift. The way a piece of furniture has been moved 2 inches and you can't explain why the room feels different, only that it does. The first thing I noticed was the phone. Daniel had never been precious about his phone. For the first 7 years of our relationship, it sat on the counter, on the nightstand, on the coffee table, open, unlocked, unguarded in the way that people are when they have nothing to hide. Then sometime in the spring of last year it started traveling with him. To the bathroom. To the garage. Always face down when it was in the same room as me. The passcode changed. I noticed because I borrowed it once to check a map when my phone was dead, and the old code didn't work. I didn't say anything. I told myself it was nothing. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. The second thing was the receipts. I handle our household finances. I always have. Daniel is brilliant at making money and genuinely terrible at tracking it, which was a dynamic that worked fine until it didn't. In August 14 months ago, I was reconciling our joint account and found a charge I didn't recognize. $214 at a restaurant called Oleander, on a Sunday evening. I knew every restaurant we frequented together. Oleander was not one of them. I mentioned it casually at breakfast the next morning. "Oh, client dinner," he said, not looking up from his phone. "Ran long. Sorry, should have texted. Client dinner. Sunday evening. $214 for what the restaurant's menu, which I looked up later privately, indicated was a tasting menu designed for 2. I filed it away. I said nothing. The third thing was Emma's birthday. She turned 6 in March. We had planned a small party, her closest friends from kindergarten, a unicorn cake from the bakery on Elliston, the backyard decorated in the pink and gold she had been requesting since December. Daniel knew the date. Had known it for months. had promised Emma specifically that he would be there to do the candles because Emma had decided that blowing out candles required both parents present or it didn't count. He called at 2:47 p.m. "There's an issue with the Meridian project, Claire. I'm going to be a couple hours late. Save me a piece of cake." Emma was in her party dress. She had been watching the driveway for 40 minutes. I told her Daddy had an important work problem, and he was trying to fix it as fast as he could. She nodded very seriously, the way 6-year-olds do when they're trying to be brave about something they don't fully understand. Then she went back to her friends. Daniel arrived at 5:15. The cake was gone. The friends had gone home. Emma was in the backyard on the swings, still in her party dress, slower and quieter than she'd been that morning. He hugged her and said he was sorry and bought her an extra present that weekend. A stuffed elephant she named Peanut and still sleeps with. Emma forgave him completely and immediately, the way children do, which is both their greatest gift and the thing that breaks your heart the most. I did not forgive him, but I also did not say that. Because here is what I understood somewhere underneath everything I was refusing to name. If I said it out loud, I would have to do something about it. And I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready because I was 19 months out of work and financially dependent, and somewhere in the previous 2 years I had let myself become a woman who second-guessed her own observations. The late nights. The face-down phone. The $214 Sunday dinner. The missed birthday. And a dozen smaller things I won't list here because individually they sound like nothing, and that is exactly how it works. You don't see the pattern until you're standing in your kitchen on a Saturday morning with a child's drawing in your hand. And then you see nothing else. I have replayed that Saturday morning more times than I can count. Not with grief, not anymore, but with something closer to clarity. Because when Daniel appeared in that kitchen doorway, wet-haired and pale, and said, "I can explain," he was operating on the assumption that I was the woman I had been for the past 2 years. Uncertain. Financially dependent. Reluctant to cause disruption. He had forgotten something important. He had forgotten what I used to do for a living. And in approximately 4 days, that forgotten detail was going to become the most expensive mistake of his life. Chapter 4. Emma's toast. I want to tell you exactly what happened in that kitchen. Not the version I told my sister that afternoon, which was abbreviated and shaking. Not the version I told my attorney 2 weeks later, which was precise and documented. The real version. The one that lives in my body still. In the specific stillness I felt. In the exact temperature of the coffee mug in my hands. In the sound of Emma's spoon scraping the bottom of her cereal bowl while her father's entire constructed life came apart 6 feet behind her. Daniel stood in the kitchen doorway for what felt like a very long time. He was wearing the white towel from our master bathroom. The good ones, the Egyptian cotton set his mother had given us as a wedding gift. His hair was dripping slightly onto his left shoulder. He was holding his phone in his right hand, which meant he had taken it into the shower with him, which meant he had been expecting something like this, which meant somewhere in the back of his mind he had always known this moment was coming. He looked at me. I looked at my coffee. "Babe." I said nothing. "Babe, I can explain." "You have until Emma finishes her toast," I said. My voice was level. I want to be honest with you about that. It wasn't a performance of calm. I was genuinely, eerily calm in the way that I have since learned happens when your nervous system decides that feeling everything at once is not an option and simply pauses. Shock, I think. Or something adjacent to it. Emma was at the kitchen table to my right, feet swinging 3 inches off the floor, working through a piece of buttered toast with the focused intensity that 6-year-olds bring to food they enjoy. She had her back mostly to us. She was humming. Daniel stepped into the kitchen. He pulled out the chair across from Emma, the one with the slightly wobbly left leg that I had asked him to fix 4 times, and he sat down. He put his phone face down on the table. Old habit. It's not what it looks like," he started. I looked at him for the first time. "Daniel." She drew her. She put her in the family portrait. She labeled her. Emma labeled her. Something moved across his face that I didn't have a word for then. I have one now. It was shame meeting calculation. The shame of being caught by your own child's crayon. The calculation of how much I knew versus how much he could still contain. How long? I asked. He looked at the table. Claire. How long, Daniel? A pause. Emma scraped her spoon. Outside, a neighbor's lawnmower started up. Distant and ordinary and absurd. About 8 months, he said. 8 months. Emma had been in kindergarten for 8 months. I had spent those 8 months doing school runs and packing lunches and attending parent-teacher nights alone because Daniel was always just finishing something up at the office. I had spent those 8 months in a house that felt incrementally lonelier and telling myself it was just the adjustment of Emma starting school. Just the natural rhythm shift of a busy marriage, just me being too sensitive, too needy, too much. 8 months. Does she know about us? I asked. Does she know you have a daughter? He nodded. Once. Small. I put my coffee mug down on the counter. Carefully. Deliberately. Does Emma know her? My voice dropped slightly on that question. Not from weakness, from the specific horror of needing to ask it. They've met a couple times, he said quietly. At the park. I didn't think Emma would. Remember. I finished. She's 6, Daniel. Not 2. She remembers everything. Emma turned around at the sound of her name. Children do that, they track their name through any noise, any distance. She looked at us both with complete openness. Daddy, are you in trouble? She asked. The question landed in the kitchen like something physical. Daniel opened his mouth and closed it. Daddy and I are just talking, baby, I said. Finish your toast. She turned back around. Resumed humming. Daniel looked at me across the kitchen with the expression of a man who has just understood, fully and finally, the size of what he has done. Not the affair. Men like Daniel minimize that instinctively, reduce it, reframe it. What he understood in that moment, I think, was the specific catastrophic miscalculation of underestimating the person across from him. I'm sorry, he said. I know, I said. And I picked my coffee back up and waited for Emma to finish her toast. She took 11 more minutes. I counted. When she was done, she slid off her chair, put her plate in the sink exactly the way I had taught her, and announced she was going to watch cartoons. I listened to her small feet on the stairs. I listened to the television come on in the playroom above us. Then I looked at my husband. You should get dressed, I said. And then you should go stay somewhere else tonight. We'll talk about the rest later. Claire, please, can we just... Daniel. One word. Quiet. Final. He got dressed. He packed a bag, a small one, the weekend bag, which told me he still thought this was temporary, still thought this was a fight we would recover from the way married people recover from fights. He paused in the kitchen doorway on his way out. I love you. I know that doesn't mean anything right now, but I need you to know that. I said nothing. The front door closed at 9:47 a.m. Emma watched 3 episodes of her cartoon. And I stood in the kitchen for a long time, very still, looking at the spot on the refrigerator where the drawing had been. Then I went upstairs, changed out of my robe, made a second cup of coffee, and started remembering who I was. What Daniel expected to happen next was fairly predictable, because it was the same thing that happens in most of these stories. Crying, calling, pleading. The slow, painful negotiation of whether a marriage could survive. He expected grief. He expected dependency. He expected that the woman he had left standing in that kitchen was the same woman he had been married to for the past 2 years. Uncertain, isolated, financially tethered. He had been in that shower for 20 minutes. In those 20 minutes, something had shifted in me that he wasn't going to be able to shift back. And when he left that morning with his weekend bag, he left behind something he had completely forgotten about. The filing cabinet. Chapter 5. What a paralegal remembers. Daniel took Emma to the park that afternoon. He called at noon, voice careful and soft, and asked if he could take her for a few hours. She shouldn't have to feel this, Claire, she shouldn't be in the middle of it. I said yes. Not because I was being generous. Because I needed the house empty. They left at 12:30. I watched his car pull out of the driveway from the upstairs window. Then I went to the home office. We had a 4-drawer filing cabinet in the corner of the room. Dark gray, unremarkable. the kind of thing that becomes invisible through familiarity. I had managed our household finances for the entirety of our marriage, which meant the top 2 drawers were mine. Utilities, insurance, Emma's school records, medical files, the mortgage documents, tax returns going back to 2018. Organized, labeled current. The bottom 2 drawers were Daniel's. His business files, his professional documents, his personal correspondence. I had never had reason to go into them. I had never wanted to. I opened the 3rd drawer. I am going to tell you what I found, and I want you to understand something first. I was not looking for evidence of the affair. I already had that. I was looking for something more important. I was looking for the complete financial picture of my marriage, because that is what a paralegal does before anything else. You do not walk into any legal situation without first understanding the full asset landscape. You do not negotiate from a position of partial information. You do not let the other side define the terms before you have read every document in the room. I had 6 years of training telling me exactly where to start. The 3rd drawer contained his business files for Whitfield Development Group, Daniels LLC, which he had formed in 2017, a year before we married. Commercial real estate consulting and development. I knew it existed. I knew it was profitable. What I did not know, what I had never thought to examine, because I had been operating as a wife rather than a paralegal, was the precise structure of it. I pulled the LLC operating agreement. I sat on the floor of the home office in my jeans and my Saturday sweater and I read it cover to cover. Tennessee is an equitable distribution state. I knew that. What equitable distribution means in plain language is that marital assets acquired or grown during the marriage, are subject to division in divorce proceedings. Not necessarily 50-50, but subject to the court's judgment of what is fair. Whitfield Development Group had been formed before our marriage, but it had grown significantly during it. The operating agreement listed capital contributions, distributions, and retained earnings. The most recent figures I could find were from a quarterly statement in the back of the folder. Retained earnings, $340,000. Current contract pipeline, 3 active commercial projects with a combined value of $2.1 million. I sat with that number for a moment. I had been clipping grocery coupons. I had been quietly anxious about whether I could re-enter the workforce after 2 years away. I had been living with the low hum of financial dependency like a sound you stop hearing because it's always there. And this man had $340,000 in retained business earnings and a $2.1 million contract pipeline. I kept reading. The 4th drawer was neater than I expected. Hanging files, labeled in Daniel's handwriting. Contracts. Correspondence. A folder marked personal insurance. A folder marked taxes. Business 2021 to 2023. And then, at the very back, a folder with no label. I almost missed it. It was thinner than the others, slightly misaligned, pushed back against the rear of the drawer like something placed there quickly and not returned to. I pulled it out. Inside, a series of printed emails. Hotel receipts. 2 restaurant receipts, including one from Oleander, $214 Sunday evening, the one I had flagged 14 months ago and let go. A printed text conversation, screenshot and printed, between Daniel and a contact saved as T. Messages going back 11 months, not 8. He had told me 8 months. It had been 11. And here is the detail that I will never forget. The one that told me everything I needed to know about exactly who I was dealing with. He had printed it. He had printed his own evidence and kept it in a filing cabinet in our shared home office. I have thought about why he did that many times since. My best understanding is this. Daniel is a real estate developer. He thinks in terms of documentation, of having a paper trail, of protecting his own position. He had kept records of the affair the same way he kept records of his business transactions, not because he was planning to use them, but because documentation is how he understands security. He had a file on his own infidelity because somewhere in the back of his mind, in the part that thinks like a businessman rather than a husband, he knew that information, even dangerous information, is an asset. What he had not accounted for was that the woman he had married thought exactly the same way. I photographed every page of that folder with my phone. Then I photographed the LLC operating agreement, the retained earnings statement, the contract pipeline documents, the tax returns, both personal and business, going back 3 years. Then I put everything back exactly as I had found it. Then I went downstairs, made my third coffee of the day, and called a number I hadn't dialed in 2 years. Hendricks and Morrow, this is Angela. Angela, I said. It's Claire Whitfield. Is Marcus in? A pause. Then, Claire. Oh my gosh, how are you? Let me check. Hold on 1 second. Marcus Hendricks had been my supervising attorney for 4 of my 6 years at the firm. He was 61 years old, semi-retired, and one of the finest family law minds in Tennessee. He had written me a reference so strong that 2 other firms had called to ask about me. He picked up on the second ring. Claire Whitfield, he said, and I could hear him smiling. To what do I owe the pleasure? Marcus, I said. I need to ask you something professionally, and then I need a referral. A brief pause. The particular pause of someone who has been a divorce attorney for 30 years and knows exactly what that sentence means. Tell me what you need, he said. I spoke to Marcus for 42 minutes that afternoon. By the time Daniel brought Emma home at 4 p.m., I had a referral to a family law attorney named Patricia Okafor. Marcus called her the sharpest asset litigator in Davidson County. A 9 a.m. Monday appointment already confirmed, and a very clear preliminary understanding of exactly where I stood. I stood considerably better than Daniel knew. Emma came through the front door with a juice box and a gap-toothed smile, completely unburdened. The way children are when adults do their job of protecting them properly. Daniel stood on the porch for a moment before I closed the door. Can we talk soon? He asked. Asterisk. Of course, I said, asterisk, and I closed the door. I had 90 days of talking to do. Just not with him. Chapter 6. The 90-day silence. Monday morning, 9 a.m. I sat in Patricia Okafor's office on the 14th floor of a building on Commerce Street in downtown Nashville, and I put my phone on her desk. On it, 247 photographs. Every document from the filing cabinet, the LLC operating agreement, the retained earnings statement, the contract pipeline, the tax returns, the printed email folder Daniel had kept on himself, the hotel receipts, the oleander receipt, the screenshot of the text conversation with T. Patricia Okafor was 53 years old, wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, and had the specific energy of a woman who had seen every version of this situation and found none of them surprising. She scrolled through the photographs without expression for approximately 6 minutes. Then she looked up. You used to be a paralegal? 6 years. Family law. She nodded once slowly. Then I don't have to explain to you what I'm looking at. No, I said. You don't. What she was looking at was this. A marital estate that was considerably larger than my husband had ever represented to me. The house, purchased in 2019 in both our names, current market value approximately $580,000, with $210,000 remaining on the mortgage. Our joint savings, $43,000. My personal account, to which Daniel transferred a monthly household allowance of $3,200. $7,400 current balance. And then the LLC, formed pre-marriage but grown significantly and documentably during it. Tennessee's equitable distribution law does not automatically entitle a spouse to premarital assets, but it does subject the growth of those assets during the marriage to distribution consideration. Whitfield Development Group had revenues of approximately $180,000 in 2017, the year it was formed. Its current retained earnings were $340,000, and its active pipeline was $2.1 million. That growth had happened during our marriage. During the years I had managed our household, raised our daughter, and provided the domestic stability that allowed Daniel to focus entirely on building his business. Patricia called it indirect contribution to marital asset growth. I called it, I gave up my career so he could build his. The law in this instance agreed with both of us. She also noted something I had already clocked. Daniel's printed evidence folder. The existence of documented proof of the affair, in his own files, in his own handwriting, dates, names, locations, was not legally necessary to our case in a no-fault divorce state. But it was extraordinarily useful for negotiation, because what it meant in practical terms was that if Daniel chose to contest the settlement, we could make the discovery process very, very uncomfortable for him. "What do you want?" Patricia asked me. I had thought about this carefully over the weekend. Not from anger. Anger is an unreliable guide in these situations, as I knew from years of watching clients let it cost them. From clarity. The house for Emma's stability. Primary custody with reasonable visitation. Child support calculated on his full business income. Not a salary figure. A settlement that reflects my contribution to the growth of his LLC. And my name removed from any joint liability for his business debts going forward. Patricia wrote without looking up. And the timeline? I want to do this quietly. No drama. No public confrontation. I want it done correctly and I want it done completely. She looked at me over her glasses. That approach requires patience. I have patience, I said. What followed was 91 days of the most deliberate, composed, quietly focused work I have ever done in my life. I did not tell Daniel I had seen a lawyer. I did not change my behavior in any way that would signal to him that something was in motion. I made dinners on the nights he came to see Emma. I was civil, even warm, in the way of two people navigating a separation with a child between them. I attended Emma's spring concert. I took her to her pediatric checkup. I signed her up for summer swim lessons. And every 2 weeks I met with Patricia Okafor on the 14th floor of that building on Commerce Street. During those 90 days, Patricia's team conducted a full forensic review of Whitfield Development Group's financials. A process Daniel was legally required to cooperate with once papers were filed, which they were, quietly, at day 31. She engaged a business valuation expert who assessed the LLC at $1.4 million in current fair market value, with $680,000 attributable to growth during the marriage. During those 90 days, I also did something else. I updated my resume. I called 2 former colleagues. I reached out to a firm that had expressed interest in me when I left Hendricks and Morrow. I had 3 conversations, then 2 interviews. At day 78, I received a written offer. Paralegal position, family law division, $51 an hour, benefits, flexible hours compatible with school pickup. I signed it on day 80. I did not tell Daniel. On day 89, Patricia called me. The valuation is complete. The proposal is drafted. We're ready. I asked her to messenger the envelope to the house. It arrived on a Wednesday. I placed it on the kitchen counter. Next to it I placed one other item. Emma's drawing. The original. Daddy's friend Trisha. Crayon hands touching. For figures where there should have been 3. I took Emma to my sister Rachel's house. I poured a glass of wine. A good one. A bottle I had been saving for something worth celebrating. I sat on Rachel's back porch in the early evening light, and I called my husband, Claire. He picked up on the first ring, which told me the envelope had arrived. His voice had that specific quality, tight, controlled, trying to sound steady. I need to talk to you about. I know, I said. Claire, this number, the valuation, they can't, this isn't. Daniel, I said. He stopped. You have until Emma finishes her toast. Silence. The longest silence of the entire 91 days. The envelope has a deadline, I said. Patricia's number is on the cover letter. I'd encourage you to call her tomorrow morning. Claire, please, can we just... Good night, Daniel. I hung up. Rachel handed me a second glass of wine without being asked. Done, she said. Almost, I said. There is a particular peace that comes not from winning, but from finally operating from your own truth. For 2 years I had been living in a version of my life that had been quietly, systematically reduced, my career, my confidence, my sense of my own capabilities. What those 91 days gave me back wasn't just a legal position. It was the memory of what I was actually capable of when I stopped second-guessing myself. Daniel called 11 times that night. I answered the 12th. And what I said, I'll tell you in the final chapter. Chapter 7. The second envelope. He called 11 times between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. that Wednesday night. I know because I watched every call come in from Rachel's back porch, the phone screen lighting up on the table beside my wine glass like a small, insistent confession. Each time his name appeared, I felt something I want to describe accurately. Not satisfaction, not cruelty, not the hot flush of revenge you see dramatized in movies. Something quieter. Something closer to the feeling of a room coming back into focus after a very long blur. I answered the 12th call at 11:23 p.m. Claire. His voice was different now. The tightness was gone, replaced by something rawer. He had spent 4 hours with that envelope, which meant he had spent 4 hours understanding, page by page, exactly what the previous 2 years looked like from the outside. I need you to know that I know what I did. I know what I cost us. And I know I don't have any right to ask you for anything. I said nothing. I let him sit in that. But I'm asking anyway, he said. Is there any version of this where you? No, I said. Not with anger. Not with grief. Just the word clean and complete. A long pause. The number, he said finally. His voice shifted back into business register, which is, I have come to understand, where Daniel goes when emotion becomes unbearable. Patricia's valuation. My attorney says it's aggressive. Your attorney can call Patricia, I said. That's what they're there for. Claire, if I liquidate at that number, it affects 3 active projects. Daniel. He stopped. I managed this household for 2 years so that you could build those 3 projects without distraction. I raised your daughter. I organized your life. I gave up a career that was mine. I paused. The number reflects that. Your attorney knows it's defensible. That's why he called it aggressive instead of wrong. Silence. Okay, he said quietly. Just that. Okay. It was the first honest word he had said to me in longer than I could accurately measure. The settlement was signed 43 days later. I will not give you every line of it because some of it belongs to Emma and Emma's future, and that is not mine to put into a story. But I will tell you the shape of it. I kept the house. We had agreed, both of us, without significant argument, that Emma's stability required it. Her school, her friends, her bedroom with the glow stars on the ceiling that Daniel had put up when she was 3. The mortgage remained joint until refinancing was complete, which Patricia had built into the timeline with a hard deadline. I received a settlement figure from the LLC valuation that I will describe only as enough. Enough to clear the mortgage. Enough to rebuild what 2 years of financial dependency had quietly eroded. Enough that when I walked into my new office at Caldwell Family Law on a Monday morning in September, I was not walking in from a position of desperation. I was walking in because I wanted to, because I had chosen to. That distinction, I have learned, changes everything about how you carry yourself. Child support was calculated on Daniel's full business income. Not the modest salary figure he drew from the LLC, but the total picture, the real number, the one the forensic accountant had spent 6 weeks establishing. Emma's needs, school, medical activities, the swim lessons she loves, are met without anxiety. That was the thing I had been most afraid of, in the quiet hours of those 91 days. Not my own financial future, which I knew I could rebuild. Emma's. The thought of her needs becoming a negotiation, a battleground, a leverage point in someone else's resentment. They are not. That was the most important line in the entire document. Daniel sees Emma on alternating weekends and 1 weeknight per week. He shows up. I will give him that. Whatever else he is, he shows up for her. She loves him without reservation, the way children do. And I have made a deliberate and non-negotiable decision to protect that. She does not need to know the details of what happened. She needs her father to be her father, and her mother to be her mother, and she needs to feel that both of those things are stable and permanent. She is 7 now. She drew another family portrait last month. 3 figures this time. Mommy. Daddy. Emma. She spelled everyone's name correctly. There is one more thing I want to tell you. About 6 weeks after the settlement was signed, I was leaving work. It was a Thursday late afternoon, the particular golden hour light that Nashville does in October, and my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Trisha. I know I have no right to contact you. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't know about Emma until much later than I should have. It doesn't change what happened, but I needed you to know." I stood on the sidewalk outside my office building and I read that message 3 times. Then I typed back 2 words. "Thank you." And I put my phone in my bag and walked to my car. I am not going to tell you that I forgave everyone involved, because that is a longer and more private process than a single text exchange. I am not going to tell you I have no hard days, because that would be a performance and I have done enough performing. There are mornings when Emma asks a question about Daddy that catches me sideways. There are nights when I lie in the quiet of the house and feel the specific weight of having built something with someone and watching it become something else entirely. But here is what I know, sitting here now, further from that Saturday morning than I ever thought I would get when I was standing in my kitchen with a crayon drawing in my hand. The woman who texted that photo to her husband while he was in the shower, the one who said, "You have until Emma finishes her toast," and meant it. She was not a new version of me. She was not a stronger version, or a harder version, or a version forged in betrayal. She was just me. The me that had been there all along. The me that Daniel had not destroyed. Had only temporarily convinced to be quiet. Emma finished her toast that morning in 11 minutes. It was more than enough time. If you've made it to the end of this story, thank you. Genuinely. I read every comment on this channel. Every single one. And the ones that stay with me longest are not the ones that say you're so strong. They're the ones that say, I recognize myself in this. Because that's the thing about these stories. They're not really about revenge. They're about the moment you stop making yourself small for someone who never deserved the space you gave them. If you're in a situation right now where you feel financially dependent, professionally diminished, or quietly invisible in your own life, I want you to hear this clearly. What you know does not expire. What you were capable of before someone made you doubt yourself, that is still inside you. Completely intact. Waiting. Claire didn't become powerful on that Saturday morning. She remembered that she already was. If this story resonated with you, tell me where you're listening from. Drop your city, your country, or just the word toast in the comments if you know. If you're new here, subscribe. New stories every week. Real specific and never generic. And if someone in your life needs to hear a story like this today, share it. You might not know how much they need it. I'll see you in the next one.